Welcome back to Travels by Carriage, a podcast that explores the weird and bizarre of our shared timeline. Do you believe in psychics? Maybe some of you identify as psychics yourself, or you visited one. I've never visited a psychic myself, but I do think that there are those out there with knowledge that can't be explained. And as this podcast has tentatively tried to explore, history is full of bold and unusual claims, and some of them are even true. So for this episode, we're going to take a look at one example. Today we're going to talk about Mary Pascarella Downey, who calls herself a very strong psychic. This is a quote pulled from the Hartford Courant in 1999. And in another interview with her, she called herself a time walker. This was on the TV show Psychic Investigations. I watched the entire Psychic Investigations episode about Mary Pascarella Downey, and it was pretty interesting. A little dated at this point. I think it's from like 2006, but still fairly interesting. Another quote from her in that interview was, "Time takes pictures and retains things." I don't know why I jotted that down, but fascinating. So, what is Mary Pascarella Downey famous for? Let's get right into it. So clearly she herself identifies as a psychic, but as you probably know, there are many people out there who identify as a psychic, and what causes one to rise to the top of public knowledge? Well, in the case of Mary Pascarella Downey, it was one particular case. Here's where I'll issue a trigger warning for murder, so I'm going to briefly talk about that incident now. So what brought Mary Pascarella Downey to fame was her involvement in the investigation of the murder of a woman named Penney Serra. She often went by the name of Penny, so some of the articles and things that I saw called her Penny, and then some called her Consetta, and I may be pronouncing that wrong, but I mostly heard her referred to as Penny on Psychic Investigations, so I will probably refer to her as Penny or just her last name, Sarah. So this murder occurred back in 1973 in New Haven, Connecticut, and police really struggled to make progress with the investigation. Sarah had been attacked in a car garage when her attacker confronted her just as she was exiting the vehicle. So she's getting out of the car, attacker comes up, and reports indicate that she may have attempted to fight back with a knife she kept in the car for cutting bread and cheese as the attacker was injured, and that knife was missing. First, I love that you have a knife in your car for bread and cheese, because I've never done that myself, but I'm kind of questioning why not right now, because that's a fun idea. And also, kudos to her for fighting back. I mean, great job, sis. She really gave it her all, because the attacker then chased her upstairs before, unfortunately, fatally stabbing her in the heart. What really grabbed people's attention about this was that this happened in broad daylight. It was the middle of the day, July 16th, 1973. It's summertime, presumably a nice day from the reports that I saw. It's not a day where tons of people are, bundled up at home because it's cold out or it's storming today. No, it's like you should feel safe getting out of your car in a parking garage in broad daylight. So how does Mary Pascarella Downey tie into this? Well, to get to that, I need to introduce you to one of the detectives on this murder case. So he went by the last name of Mezzicane. I do think I have his full name in my notes here somewhere. I will come to it. But for now, we're going with Mezzicane. He was a detective with the New Haven Police Department, and he reached out to Mary when he had no other ideas on where to go. In the Psychic Investigation episode, they talk about how he originally heard of her. I want to say it was in some newspaper article that had interviewed her, but I'm not 100% on that. If you're interested, definitely go watch the Psychic Investigations episode. I think it was on Amazon Prime. It was very informative. So unfortunately, as I mentioned, the police were really kind of struggling with this, and several years would go by without a break in the case. And Mezzacane would meet with Mary Pascarella Downey several times over the course of these years. At the first meeting, Mary drew a picture that looked similar to composites made from witnesses. And she said that she smelled gasoline and motor oil. Okay, so pictures that look similar to the composite photos and the smell of gasoline and motor oil. She also got a very particular phrase in mind as she focused on this. And that phrase was "blood will tell." She says this exact quote herself in the Psychic Investigators episode. Definitely go check that out. And she claimed that it would be several years before the case was solved. So this information was helpful, but it really didn't give them much to go on. So trying to get more information, Downey asked Mezzacane to return with an item of Penny's, which he did. He brought along a favorite coat of hers. And he brought something else to the meeting, though. He brought Penny's father. As Mezzacane recalls in the documentary, following the meeting with Penny's father, he confirmed that he believed her. As in, Penny's father believed what Downey had to say. Over the course of their meetings, again, which spanned years, Downey also told police that the suspect was slight, clean-shaven, worked in a business involving automobiles, and was connected in some way to water. She also claimed to have seen a uniform and the letter E on his name tag. Okay, so we've got all this information that she's provided over the course of the years. She provides the picture that looks similar to who witnesses said they saw. She smells the gasoline and the motor oil. She says blood will tell. She says the suspect is slight, clean-shaven, worked in a business involving automobiles, and was connected in some way to water. And finally, she has this vision. She sees a uniform and the letter E on his name tag. So at that point, we don't really get any more information. The case goes cold, and we don't find out anything more until 24 years after Penny's death, when many of Downey's predictions were proven to be correct. Edward R. Grant was arrested and charged with the murder of Penney Serra. Of course, Edward starts with an E. But here are some more important details about Edward. He was an auto mechanic from a town called Waterbury, and he had a rather slight build. Now, the skeptics among us might rightly worry that perhaps Miss Downey's description may have swayed the opinion of local authorities. But worry not, travelers, because this arrest was supported by DNA evidence found at the scene, specifically Edward Grant's fingerprint. In May of 2002, he was sentenced to 25 years to life for the murder of Penney Serra. Interesting kind of sad side note here as to why police were so motivated to find Sarah's killer 25 years after her death. You know, there's a lot of cold cases out there, and not all of them get the attention this case did. And a large part of that is because every year after her death, her father placed an ad in the local paper counting the days passed with no arrests. Sadly, he died in 1998, just 7 months before Edward Grant's arrest. I couldn't get copyright to post these on the YouTube, but if you Google it, you can find some images that show a couple of these ads. And it's just so telling of his commitment to get justice for his daughter, and just so tragic that he missed it by 7 months, you know? Gosh, 7 months. Mary Pascarella Downey herself died on July 25th, 2011. And with that, the end of the story of her so-called psychic feats. So that is the case that made Mary Pascarella Downey famous. If you Google, you can certainly find other cases that she was involved in and get a little more detail on her. I just wanted to kind of provide a brief overview of the case that brought her to fame. I'll close us now with a few facts. One other word kept coming to mind for Mary Pascarella Downey over the course of her multiple visits with Detective Mezzacame. The word blue kept occurring to her, but she couldn't determine what it meant. It would later become known that the parking garage where Penney was killed had used a color coding system to mark their floors before transitioning to numbering them. The color assigned to the floor where Penney was killed was blue. One other interesting fact for you, according to internet rumors, Downey was invited by the Warrens to investigate the Amityville hauntings on March 6, 1976. I found this on a Facebook page dedicated to her memory and on a website dedicated to the Amityville haunting. According to the Facebook page, she found the home very beautiful and didn't sense any paranormal activity until she reached the second floor. There, she claimed to have seen the ghost of a young girl. Make of it what you will. On the Facebook post again is a reply by her son, Tony, who said, and I quote, "Mom was one hell of a lady. Even though I used to bust her chops about her hocus pocus, she had a gift that helped so many." Thank you, travelers, for joining me for another episode of Travels by Carriage. If you'd like to know more about Mary Pascarella Downey, be sure to check out the sources section in the description below or below the video on the YouTube channel. There are a lot more stories about Mary Pascarella Downey out there, and I encourage you to check them out. Please be sure to submit any ideas for episodes to me through social media. I'd love to hear from you all. Thank you again for joining us on our journey today. See you next time, travelers. Do you like scary stuff?
Yeah.